I've never been good at understanding my father. Growing up, he wasn't exactly a warm figure in my life. He had his own way of showing love, but it was never really the kind you could feel or touch. As a kid, I always wanted him to show me affection, to say the right things, to just be there. But he was distant, more of a provider than a nurturer. I spent years trying to figure him out, and after a while, I just gave up. He was who he was, and I had to accept that. When I became a father, I vowed I'd do things differently. My son Leo was born, and instantly, everything about my world changed. I was determined to be there for him in ways my father never was for me. I promised myself I'd be the kind of dad that didn't just exist in his life but was an active part of it. I'd show him love, affection, and the support I'd always craved as a child. But things weren't always perfect. Being a father, just like being a son, is complicated. There were moments when I questioned my ability to be the dad I wanted to be, especially with my own dad still around, casting his shadow over my attempts. But then came Leo's 7th birthday, a day I'll never forget. I invited my father to Leo's birthday party, like I had many times before. I tried not to get my hopes up, but I couldn't help it. Maybe this time things would be different. Maybe this time he'd surprise me. But when he walked in, I saw the same stern look on his face, the same silence that had been there for most of my life. He didn't speak much to anyone, barely acknowledged me, but he made his way over to Leo, who was eagerly opening gifts. And then he handed Leo something wrapped in shiny paper. A small, square box, completely out of place for a child's birthday. I tried to keep a neutral face, but I could feel my heart racing. What on earth was in this box? Leo tore off the paper, his small hands fumbling with the tape, and finally opened it. Inside there was a rock. A plain, unremarkable stone. My son looked at it, confused. I looked at my father, waiting for an explanation. "That's for you," my father said, his voice as cold as ever. "A rock for your journey." I could feel the room fall silent. Everyone looked at each other, unsure of how to react. My son was still staring at the rock, trying to make sense of it, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. He turned to me, looking for some sort of validation or understanding, but all I could give him was a shrug. "Why a rock?" I finally asked, my voice tight. My father didn't answer right away. He just looked at me like he always did, his eyes filled with a certain kind of sadness that I couldn't place. It wasn't anger or indifference, just sadness. "Because," he said after a long pause, "sometimes you have to carry something heavy to understand what matters." That was all he said. No further explanation. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with my son, holding a rock. I couldn't help but feel a pang of anger. Why did he do this? Why couldn't he just give Leo a gift like any other grandparent would? But then, as I watched Leo, I started to understand something. This rock was his way of saying something. It was his idea of teaching us both a lesson. Maybe not the lesson we wanted, but the one he thought we needed. And as bizarre as it seemed, I couldn't deny that it was memorable. I knelt down to Leo and explained, "Sometimes people give gifts in strange ways. But what matters is that you have the power to decide what it means." Leo seemed to understand more than I expected. He kept the rock, carrying it around with him for weeks afterward, sometimes looking at it thoughtfully. It became something more than just a stone in a box. It became a reminder that, even in his own way, my father was trying to connect with us. It wasn't the way I would have chosen, but it was the way he knew how. And maybe that's what fatherhood is. Not always knowing the perfect way to show love, but doing it in the best way you can, even if that means giving a rock in an iPhone box. The weeks after Leo's birthday felt quieter. Not just because of the usual lull after a big celebration, but because I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. My father's gift, the rock, had left a mark on me in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was almost as if it had triggered something deep inside, something unresolved. I remember sitting one evening after Leo had gone to bed, staring at that stone. It sat on the mantelpiece, now an odd fixture in our living room. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as just another one of my father's strange attempts at meaning. But another part of me couldn't ignore the weight it carried. The rock wasn't just a rock. It felt like a symbol. A representation of all the things unsaid between me and my father, the years of distance, the attempts to communicate that fell flat. I started to realize something. My father had never been good with words. I'd known that for years, but this was a different kind of realization. He had never learned how to express his love through the usual means. And maybe that was because he had never received it in the way he needed. The rock, in its strange simplicity, was the only way he could give something meaningful without having to say the things he couldn't bring himself to say. I still didn't understand it all. But I felt something shift. Maybe it was the understanding that we all have our limitations when it comes to love and connection. My father had his own struggles with showing affection, and I'd spent my whole life resenting him for it. But now I began to see that his way of showing love, however misguided, was still his attempt at reaching out to me and to Leo. He had given us something that mattered to him in the only way he knew how: a stone. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe I wasn't as different from him as I'd always believed. Sure, I was trying to be a better father, but I was also figuring things out as I went. I didn't have all the answers. Maybe this rock wasn't just a gift for Leo, it was a gift for me too. A chance to see things from my father's perspective, to understand the complexities of parenthood, and the ways in which love can be expressed without words. One evening I decided to visit my father. I hadn't been to his house in weeks. I knew things had been strained between us, but something inside me urged me to make the first move. I couldn't keep running away from the past, and I couldn't let Leo grow up with the same confusion I had about my relationship with him. When I arrived, my father was sitting in his usual spot by the wind. "Dad, can we talk?" He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. He nodded slowly as if he was expecting this, but not quite sure what it would mean. "I've been thinking about the rock," I said, sitting down next to him. "And I think I get it now. I think I understand what you were trying to do." He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes softened. I could tell that, for once, he was listening. I continued, "It's not about the rock itself, it's about the way you gave it. You were trying to connect, even if it wasn't the way I would have expected." He nodded again slowly. "I didn't know how to give you anything more than that. I didn't have the words." I could feel the weight of his admission. "You didn't have to, Dad. But I think I've been too hard on you. I spent so many years thinking I had to be different from you, that I had to be the opposite of you in order to be a good father. But maybe the truth is we're not that different." There was a long silence, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like we were finally on the same page. "Maybe we're not," he said, his voice quiet. "But I tried in my way." "I know," I replied, my throat tight. "And I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. I don't know what changed that day, but something shifted between us. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of resentment. I didn't feel like I was trying to fix a broken relationship. It felt like we were finally meeting somewhere in the middle, understanding each other in ways we hadn't before." The next time Leo saw my father, he asked if he could bring the rock back with him. My dad smiled for the first time in ages, and I saw a glimmer of pride in his eyes as he handed the stone back to Leo. I didn't know what the future held for our relationship, but I knew one thing for sure: we were no longer strangers to each other. Sometimes, it's the strangest gifts that bring people closer, and sometimes, the smallest things carry the heaviest weight. That rock was more than just a gift. It was a bridge, a quiet message that, despite everything, my father had always tried to reach out to me in his own way. And now I could finally hear him. Weeks passed and life began to feel a little more settled. Leo was growing up fast, and with each day I found myself more and more determined to be the kind of father who could communicate with him without all the confusion I had with my own father. But the lessons, even the hard ones, were starting to sink in. The stone had changed things, not just with my dad but with how I viewed myself as a parent. One evening I was sitting with Leo on the couch after dinner, and he turned to me holding the rock in his hands. I had almost forgotten about it in the whirlwind of daily life, but Leo kept it close, tucked into his backpack or on his bedside table like a treasure. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet but serious, "I think this rock is special. It's like a reminder." I smiled at him, a little surprised by his depth. "A reminder of what?" Leo stared at the stone for a moment before looking back at me. "That things don't always look the way we expect them to. But they still matter." My heart caught in my chest. For a 7-year-old, Leo had just hit the nail on the head. I hadn't told him much about the rock's significance to me, but somehow he'd grasped it all on his own. Maybe kids were better at understanding these things than we gave them credit for. "That's right," I said softly, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Sometimes things don't come wrapped up in pretty packages. But that doesn't mean they don't have value." Leo nodded thoughtfully, clearly taking it all in. "Like how Grandpa gave it to me. He didn't give me an iPhone like the other kids, but I think this is better. It's real." I had to look away for a moment, blinking back the unexpected surge of emotion. I hadn't expected a rock to become such a profound part of our lives, but somehow, it had. My son was teaching me lessons about life and love in a way I never anticipated. That night, I sat on the edge of Leo's bed before he drifted off to sleep, thinking about the past few weeks. I had gone through life thinking I had all the answers when it came to fatherhood. I thought that being the better father meant doing things differently from how my own dad had done them. But now I was beginning to see that maybe the key to being a good parent wasn't in how different I could be from my own father, but in how I could learn from him. I wasn't perfect, no parent is. But I had come to realize that my father had tried, even if he wasn't great at expressing it. And in his own quiet way, he had given me the opportunity to understand him, just as I was now trying to understand Leo. I picked up the phone one evening, staring at the contact for my dad. I hadn't called him since our conversation at his house, but I knew it was time. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine without addressing the things that mattered. "Hey Dad," I said when he picked up, my voice steadier than I expected. "How've you been?" There was a pause on the other end. "I'm fine. Busy." "Good," I said. "I've been thinking. About the rock." Another pause and then I heard a sigh. "I didn't think you'd want to talk about that." "I do," I said more firmly than I'd anticipated. "It meant something. I think I get it now." "I didn't have much to give," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "But I thought maybe that rock would teach something. It wasn't about the gift. It was about the message." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." We were both quiet for a long moment. I didn't know what kind of closure I was hoping for, but this felt like a step in the right direction. "I'm proud of you," he said suddenly, his voice gruff but genuine. "You're a good father." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. My relationship with my father had always been complicated, but hearing him say those words stirred something deep inside of me. It wasn't the kind of compliment I'd expected from him, and it wasn't easy to hear. But in that moment I realized something. My dad wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But we were doing the best we could in our own way. "I'm trying," I said simply. I think I finally understand." And for the first time I really felt like we were on the same page. It wasn't perfect and maybe it would never be, but we were connected in a way I never imagined. The next time Leo saw my father, they spent time together in a way that felt different, like there was an unspoken understanding between them now. They didn't need to talk about the rock, but somehow, it had become their share. It was a moment that had brought all of us closer, even in its strange, unexpected way. I don't know if my dad ever fully understood how much his rock had meant, or if he ever realized that it had changed everything for me. But I didn't need him to. Because sometimes, the things we can't explain are the things that end up making the most sense. The months that followed that conversation with my dad were filled with small but meaningful shifts. Nothing drastic, but the undercurrent of change was undeniable. I could tell that my father, in his own way, was beginning to open up more, not just to me but to the idea that he didn't have to be perfect to make a difference in our lives. And for the first time in a long time, I began to feel a sense of peace with him, even if we still had miles to go. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon Leo and I were out running errands when he asked me to stop by a local park. He had a surprise for me, he said. Curious, I agreed, and we parked the car, walking towards a small patch of grass where he often liked to play. Leo had become more thoughtful lately, like he was carrying a weight that he was eager to share but didn't quite know how. When we reached the park, Leo immediately ran to a tree near the edge of the field, where something was tucked carefully in the dirt. It was the rock, my dad's rock. Only now it looked different. It had been cleaned, polished, and its rough edges had been smoothed out. It no longer looked like just any old stone. It looked like something with purpose, something that had been transformed over time. "Dad," Leo said, his voice excited but serious, "I thought we could make it a family thing." He knelt down and gently placed the rock into a small hand-carved box. It was made of wood, simple but beautiful, like something you would find in an old store or at a craft fair. Inside he placed the rock with care, like it was the most precious thing in the world. "I wanted to give it back," Leo explained, his eyes wide with understanding, "but I also wanted to keep it. So I thought I could make it a family treasure. We could take it on trips with us, and each time we go somewhere new we add a note or something special. That way it's not just a rock. It's a reminder of all the places we've been together." My heart swelled as I watched him. Leo, my son, had taken the message my father had tried to give him, and instead of just holding onto it like a relic of the past, he had turned it into something bigger, something that could grow with him. "You mean like a family tradition?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Yeah," he nodded. "Every time we go somewhere we put something new inside the box. And when we're older we can look at it together and remember everything we did." I couldn't help but be moved by his thoughtfulness. He was already taking the lessons we had learned, passing them along, and creating something beautiful in the process. It was a sign that he understood what I hadn't when I was his age, That the most important things in life often come wrapped in the simplest packages. Let's do it, I said, my voice filled with a quiet sense of pride. Let's make it a tradition. A family tradition. And that's what we did. We started taking the rock with us on trips, adding small notes, photos, and mementos to the box. It wasn't just about the rock anymore. It was about the memories we were creating together. It became a symbol of connection, not just between me and my son but between the past and the future. The next time we saw my father, I brought the box with us. I showed him the polished stone and explained what Leo had done. At first, my dad was quiet, looking at the box with a strange kind of nostalgia. But then a small smile crept across his face. I never thought it would turn into all this, he said, his voice softer than usual. Me neither, I replied. But sometimes the things we least expect are the things that shape us the most. For the first time, I saw something in my father's eyes that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just pride, it was understanding. Understanding that the simple things, the things he didn't know how to explain, had found their place in the world. They had found their way to Leo and through him to me. We didn't say much more about the rock, but I could tell that my dad felt something too. We had reached a point where words weren't necessary anymore. The rock had become more than just a gift. It had become a bridge, a way for all of us to connect without needing to explain everything. That night, as Leo and I sat together, looking through the box and adding new notes to it, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. My relationship with my father had always been complicated, and for a long time I thought I had to fix it. But I realized something important. Sometimes you don't fix the past. You learn from it. You carry it with you and you make something better out of it. The rock, in all its simplicity, had brought us closer. It had taught me that love isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about the quiet moments of understanding. And with every trip, with every new addition to the box, I knew we were building something stronger, something that would last. It was a year later when I realized that the tradition Leo had started, the rock in its small wooden box, had become something more than just a family keepsake. It had turned into a living memory, one that would continue to grow and evolve long after Leo and I were gone. What began as an odd, seemingly insignificant gift from my father had transformed into a powerful symbol, one that connected generations even without our conscious effort. Leo, now 8, had a different perspective on the rock. It wasn't just a family tradition for him, it was a source of pride. Whenever we traveled, he made sure to pick out something unique for the box. A leaf from the Grand Canyon, a seashell from a beach in California, a small stone from a mountain trail he'd hiked with me. Each item had its own story, its own place in time, and I could see in Leo's eyes that he understood this was something far bigger than just It was about ensuring that what we had learned, both from my father and from our own mistakes, wasn't lost but shared with the next generation. I think you will, I said, my voice thick. And I think you'll be able to tell them about the rock, about the way it started. How it brought us all closer. Leo smiled, his eyes shining with a wisdom I hadn't expected from someone so young. I want to make sure they understand that even when things don't seem perfect, they can still be important. Like Grandpa's rock. I felt my chest tighten, the full weight of his words sinking in. This was what it was all about, the message that had traveled from my father to me and from me to Leo. That even the most imperfect, unexpected things could hold meaning if we allowed them to. That night, as I closed Leo's bedroom door behind me, I took one last look at the box on his shelf. The rock was no longer just a stone, it was a piece of our family's story. It had evolved in ways none of us could have predicted, but it had done exactly what it was supposed to do: connect us, teach us, and remind us of the value in what we sometimes overlook. The next time I spoke to my father, I told him about Leo's latest addition to the box, how the tradition had grown, and how Leo had asked about passing it down to his own children one day. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before my dad spoke, his voice softer than usual. I never thought it would end up like this, he said almost to himself. But I guess, sometimes you give something and you don't realize just how much it means until much later. I smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. The rock had never been just about the stone itself. It had been about the meaning we gave it, the memories we built around it, and the ways we connected even when we thought we couldn't. It had been about understanding, about accepting the imperfections in ourselves and each other, and finding a way to make something beautiful out of it. Thanks, Dad, I said quietly, feeling a sense of closure I didn't expect. You did good. We both sat in silence for a while after that. There were no more words needed. Somehow, after all these years, we had both arrived at the same place. As I walked through the house later that evening, I glanced at the mantel where the rock's box rested. It was no longer just a symbol of my father's strange gift, or of my own attempts to understand him. It was a testament to what love truly meant. Not always perfect, but always worth the effort. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to fix the past. All I needed was to keep showing up, to keep learning, and to keep passing on the things that truly mattered. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.